These particles need to come into contact with the ground plane. To create the interaction between particle and ground, I'm going to use a surface interaction compound. If I look under the tasks menu into the surface interaction folder, you'll notice that I have two bounce compounds, one with bounce off surface and one that has a friction. The friction allows me to grab onto the particles as they slide across the surface rather than having a frictionless interaction. I'm going to pull in the bounce off surface with friction, and again, a bounce is calculated every frame, so I'm going to need to make room for it in the terminal port, or the port 1s through 4 here of my ice tree. I'm going to actually insert a port directly after the emit, so that particles, once they're emitted, can then calculate their bounce capability. And I'm going to actually use the surface here as a collision object. Now, in the case of this ground, the fact that I've got two pieces really doesn't work for me. I'd have to actually plug two surfaces in, and it looks like there's probably gaps between these two surfaces as well. And while it's okay to provide multiple surfaces, it's probably easier to provide a single merged surface. So I'll actually use the merge tool, grab both pieces. I'll create a polymesh merge between the two objects. I'll hide the original inputs, and I'll merge the materials and UVs from the two previous objects onto my newly merged polymesh grid. So that looks good there. And if I freeze the results, I can now go and delete the original grass and path area from my environment model. And I'll actually replace it with this new ground object. I need to actually tile the UVs on this, so let me just jump into the UV editor, Alt-7, and wrap my UVs in the UV direction. So infinite tiling. This will just help me when I actually render later on. This is just a tiled map. Okay, so I'm going to actually provide this ground object, which I'll pull into my environment model, as a get data node. I want to get the actual ground surface and use it to solve this bounce off surface compound. So if I just minimize the ice tree and minimize my explorer, let's see what we've got. If I press play, particles streaming down, and they bounce and they die right after they bounce. So we could increase their lifetime now that they're actually bouncing. You can see there's no particles penetrating my grid, and create a more interesting effect upon collision.